everybody, for joining us for our second episode of this season 2, which covers the TF interviews. This one in particular will cover former President of Nigeria, President Obasanjo. We are joined by guests of the interview, but also people who asked Obasanjo questions directly. If you guys wouldn't mind introducing yourselves, starting with Ibrahim.
Hi guys, I'm Ibrahim. I went to University of Jordan, currently working at a financial services firm in London. Happy to be here.
Hi everybody. My name is Obina. I was the co-host for the interview, and I'm a producer with the Tony Falala interviews. Yeah.
Hi everyone. My name is Ajoke. I was also a co-host for the interview, and I'm on the research team for the TF interviews.
Hi everyone, my name is Ndidi. I'm research director for the TF interviews. And yeah, I was of course at the interview.
Awesome. So let's get into it. So first question, how did it feel? Well, I know how it felt. I'm Nigerian also, but I'm curious, how did it feel listening to a former president, asking him questions and just being there? Let's start with Obina.
Oh yeah. I think I might have said this before, right? But during the show, there's so many technical issues going on that you forget you're talking to a former president. But I will say that it's a common theme that is a theme that we're seeing again. He was so friendly and so approachable. I guess I was kind of not. I was not expecting that. So it was very nice, very approachable, and I will say that the responses that he gave are interesting. But yeah.
Same, I would agree with Obina as well. I don't know him, so I shouldn't be shocked, but I didn't expect him to be so. He seemed to be kind of like a down-to-earth person or like a friendly person, and he even stayed longer than he was supposed to, which was, and he didn't like make a fuss about that at all. So that was quite nice. And I also think that his answers were interesting, and it was very cool to get his take on some of the things that we asked him, and also kind of see the ways that he navigated some questions as well.
Yeah, just to add on to that, like they've said, he was really nice. And so it was a very nice thing to see, I guess, someone that everybody holds in high regard, or maybe not high regard, but like someone that is sort of mysterious to the Nigerian public, be very jovial and very like welcoming to everyone, even though they were asking really hard questions, which like everybody has said, his answers were very interesting. Probably get to that later. So yeah.
Yeah, I want to give my perspective to just because. Well, actually, I'll go to Ibi first. He watched the interview back, but how did you find it?
I've watched a few interviews with Obasanjo, and he's always a bit, he's like a friendly uncle. But so I wasn't surprised by his temperament, but I did remember thinking, I'd be before like I get called up so abruptly by Professor Falala, I would be thinking, okay, gotta get this question out right, because even I think it was a Jokeo question where he interrupted you halfway. He was like, I can't hear you. He was like, speak up. And I was like, yeah, I would be nervous if this was me. But overall, I thought it was good. I thought what struck me the most was like when you've been president, all your anecdotes are so interesting. Because it's like every phone call you have is an anecdote. Like, they called me and we made 80 million today. That's just my life. But yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think very similar with everyone. Although I don't know if I was quite surprised that he was quite nice. Yeah, he seems I feel like Obasanjo is that person that has been able to interact with like every tribe in Nigeria, kind of navigates his way through like all the tension and stuff like that. I think for me, the major thing was what I saw was current climate in Nigeria, former president of Nigeria, and then I'm just listening and I'm just looking at it from that lens, and it was just like a lot of conflicting emotion in that period. Like it's great because the president, like it's awesome, and there were some things that he said, and I was talking to Diana about this before. It's like I see what's going on in Nigeria now, and it's like I don't know. But we'll speak about all this. So yeah, Diana, do you want to ask the first question?
Yeah, so we'll just jump straight into some of the questions that he answered and kind of like analyze what we would have preferred him to say, but also what you felt about what he did say. So I'm personally not a big fan of his decentralization idea, but obviously I don't know the ins and outs of Nigerian politics. I feel as though it's a little bit decisive. So if I'm an outsider looking in, considering from what I've heard from conversations with Jordan, that Nigeria already has its own fractures in terms of like tribalism, religious friction, things like that. So my concern with this the US style state system is that it could be just divisive as well as it could dilute the responsibility, because he was saying, oh, we want to, what did he say?
I think what we're speaking about was, and I believe EB will have something to say about this, just have a feeling. But I believe we were speaking about like different states having more of like more power to do what they want within the state rather than the federal system holding all the
He was talking about the
responsibilities.
federal system, exactly. And somebody asked him, somebody opened the question saying, you're the longest reigning leader in Nigeria. And so obviously, apparently there's been a lot of conversation within Nigeria already about the restructuring of the system. And Obasanjo kept repeating devolution of responsibility, devolution of responsibility. And it doesn't like fill me with confidence that we are not Nigerian, but Nigerian people don't have someone to hold responsible. If that makes any sense.
Oh, okay. So I think I know what you're talking about now, and I think okay. So Nigeria is a federal system, right? What that means is that, of course, we have states, and I guess the states have governors and have their own governments too. But then they also kind of revert power to the president at the center of it, right? And in some ways, by concentrating power at the federal level, it's kind of good for setting a uniform policy, right? But what it also does is that it concentrates power at the federal level. And it was important to know Nigeria is a very diverse state, but diverse in a unique way. I'm not sure if this is exactly what he meant, but by decentralizing the power, right? By giving some powers to states and by passing it out, what you're doing is that you're taking away some of that authority from the federal government, right? But it also just means that you're putting the responsibility of development with the states and the people who live in the states, kind of like what you have in the US to some extent.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot more sense to me. So I think I misunderstood him, but in that regard, what I was seeing as a more divisive tool, I suppose, can be seen as something to equal out, like yeah, equal out power. I suppose there's a lot, like you said, there's a lot less power at the top, and so Jordan and I spoke about this before, that if and also Ovina just said that if you're from a certain tribe and you become the president, your interests could be.
Okay, first thing I should probably say, right, and historically, there have been about 3 to 4 major regions in Nigeria. So you have the northern region, you have the southwest region, and the southeast region, right? There's always a bit of tension between all of these regions in some form or another. We had our Nigerian Civil War, and it was primarily due to some tensions between the east and the north, amongst other things, of course. But like, yes, those tensions have always been there. So essentially, the presidency usually is, they say, is meant to be rotated, if that makes sense, right? So that in this year it's somebody from the southeast, usually like an Igbo person, or in this year it's somebody from the southwest, usually a Yoruba person, or someone from the north, which is usually a Hausa person, right? And it usually like it rotates in that way. So every 8 years, you're meant to have someone that represents a new region. Sometimes centralization of power is good if everybody is of a similar mindset. If it's a winner takes all kind of frenzy, then centralization of power just means that you have more power to impose your will upon other groups. Indeed, I think I like even Ibrahim, like, what do you guys think? Like, yeah.
I think there's a lot of discussion around structural changes to fix Nigeria, and I'm not sure I'm convinced that the issue is structural in Nigeria. if we had a president that, did his job well, it wouldn't matter that he was from a certain place. The problem is that the people within the system are not operating as the system is designed to. Let's say we devolve power. How many of those 36 governors that are now, chieftains in their states, even more powerful than before, how many of them are going to perform better than the federated character? The problem is not necessarily that the system is not working, in my view. It's more that the people in the system are working against it. And until you fix
You-
that, this new system is just going to divide power for more people to abuse.
How
you
did you
know,
find that he spoke about that? I don't know. Like, I'm very curious to know, I guess, because he spoke about bad leadership and bad governance. So similar to what you're talking about. And I don't know. I found that a bit conflicting. I don't know.
I mean, he has
in
been
what
out of
sense,
government
Jordan?
for a long time. Now, it's been 12 years. Nigeria doesn't resemble now. The Nigeria he left and Nigeria now don't resemble. Like he said, like after him, the next person does whatever they like. He has nothing to do with that. And I think that's fair to an
Mm.
extent.
Yes, to an extent. Yeah, when he was making that point, I was like, there still needs to be a level of accountability for the fact that like the leaders that came after him just did like a bad job. Like just came there for their own personal interest and not necessarily
Um,
hmm?
I would actually disagree that all leaders that came after him did their own thing. I think Yaradua was a good leader. He died. I think Goodluck
Yeah.
Jonathan was not a bad leader, actually. So that might be an unpopular opinion, but I actually think that Goodluck Jonathan, um, I wouldn't say that he was like a fantastic leader, but I think that good things were happening in Nigeria when he was president. Um, and I think we're very naive. Um, and the sort
Fair
of
enough, yeah.
because I think a lot of people now are like, oh my gosh, like we're actually sorry, good Lord Jonathan, for the things that we said to you and things that we thought about you. And in a way, I think it's partly due to the like my okay, maybe I mean it's not like I'm too crazy about him. He didn't like he paid my school fees, but I think that the sort of leadership that he, like I guess oh gosh, the sort of leader that he was isn't the kind that Nigerians are used to. When we talk about soft power, I think that was the kind of power that he actually exhibited. Um, and so I think that, yeah, I don't know. I just think it would be unfair to say that, oh, everybody that came after Obasanjo was like horrible. That's just my opinion.
Well, I do think that in terms of, I mean, Obasanjo's presidency was also not like perfect as well. Like there were still issues of like corruption, there were still issues of human rights violations and things like that. And so to a reason, I guess like in my mind, like the standard I am holding them all up to might be like a higher standard to some regard. And I feel like even when, Yaradua, Jonathan or Buhari now, like there's still been issues of corruption. And like in talking about like change and what's better for Nigeria, as Ibrahim said, it seems to be structural. Like we need to decentralize. We need to like. He's talking about like what's it called? The fact that like the debts and the loans that we're taking, they're a lot higher now, but like no one's actually talking about like why they're higher now or like the impact of that or like the irresponsibility that's going on. And so whatever structural solution is being suggested without like a proper interrogation of the fact that we are really lacking when it comes to leaders that care about like creating a
Competence.
society that works, that competent leaders that care about a society that works for everyone and not just them. I mean, now with like Buhari's administration and this like administration is just like I keep telling people like I don't think Nigeria is a real country. Like that place is not real. But I just think it's just not and that's the thing for me when you're talking to leaders, because I guess they're also political to some regard. And so like there is not amnesia, but they walk around certain things and they don't say it like the person on the street who is feeling the impact of the incompetence of our leaders would say it. And so it's just like, oh yeah, we need to decentralize and we need to like, they're not
Hey,
doing things right.
I always have thoughts on this stuff, right? I think we probably need to look at an analysis of where responsibility truly lies within Nigeria. Like how powerful so to speak, or how powerful is the president in, like, when it comes to impacting change, especially impacting change that will cut across the populace, right? How much influence does the president have? Because you see that even in Nigeria, like, there's a disparity in the states, a massive disparity in the states and the prosperity of the states, right? And in some ways, is that a fault of the government or of the president, or is it a fault of the governors or the state government, right? And I don't know. I think that that's just something that's important to consider when considering some of the things that President Obasanjo said. Uh, yeah.
I was just going to say that I actually think you guys are right. Like, leadership is really important, but I also think that it's helpful if we also develop systems at the same time. Because if you think about somewhere like America, why America hasn't burned to the ground is because they have a system. Even though the checks and balances haven't worked completely, they've stopped Donald Trump from doing a lot of things, and they've prevented this, like, that country from, like, burning. And so, I also think that the federal government should be decentralized. I think that there's too much power there, like Obina was saying, and it's just pushing lots of politics in that area when state governors feel like they have to pander again to the federal government. They don't have autonomy to do what they can. And so if maybe there was a system already that was working in a good direction, even if we were maybe still training leaders, or we didn't have good leaders all the time, the system might still be able to catch up and pick up some of the slack from the lack of competency in these, like, positions and stuff.
Actually, like, on that real quick. But I was just gonna say, I don't think decentralization. I don't know if it's necessarily the best policy, right? Because I'll leave this as a primer for Jordan too. But I don't know what you need when you are working in a developing economy. In a system like America's, right, where things are kind of developed and powers have kind of evolved and there have been checks and balances that have been put into place, it's probably very good, right? But then when you need a unified development plan, so to speak, or you need to concentrate all your forces together when you're trying to build your economy, I do not know how good diversifying power is for you, right? Because it actually makes things harder to get. It makes it harder to get things done. And of course, the good thing is that it means that the one person that's in charge cannot impose their will upon everybody else. But at the same time, sometimes you might actually need that and want that when you're trying to get the whole country to move in a certain direction that you know will be better or think will be better. So, Jordan, yeah.
So I was going to the two things. It's interesting what you brought up, Obina, because it reminded me of when you asked him about the roles the youth have to play, and he was like, "Yeah, we all have something to play, but leadership is important." I found that interesting, and I also wanted to say, as we're speaking, I think it'd be great if it's great we're like diplomatic, but like we put this in the context of Nigeria as a developing country. This is not America, the UK, or any of this is like, do you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I think.
So I feel we don't firstly you said develop, we don't have a system. Nigeria has
That's a
organized
bit unfair.
chaos. But no, okay, we have a system, but we obviously have a system because we're still working, but it's like it is a system that kind of like Obina's wall, like he described in the previous episode. It is. It feels like organized chaos. That's just how I.
That's perfect.
That's legit how I see it. So even with the decentralization, I said this to Diana. I was like, I don't think it's going to transform Nigeria into an amazing nation because we decentralize government. But at least for me, all I see it as is the tribal tension. If anything, it gives everybody what they want, if you get what I'm trying to say. And leading on to that, and I was going to ask, how did you guys feel about his answers when it came to the tension in Nigeria? Because he said something which was quite interesting. I was like, how is it that people who are after the civil war are more bitter? Joker is like, let
I
me go.
remember I remember texting Isabel, like, I don't get, like, for me, I did not understand how he wasn't able to understand that. Like, he kept on asking the question like it was like, and no disrespect, but he kept on asking the questions like it was like an unusual thing to happen. Like, a war happens and like, and what the question I think I said Isabella is like, you're asking why the children of the people that died are more upset than the people that died. Like, I don't get, like, do you know, like, how is that a valid question? In some people, and I do think like, obviously like people, and I think when we're having the conversation about the whole Civil War, I was saying that we shouldn't kind of underestimate the fact that like a lot of young people our age are also very much engaging in conversation about the Civil War and the impact that has had. And I think he brought that up in saying that like also our generation are more upset. But I think that I think being kind of in parts of interrogating the history, especially when you have history that hasn't been addressed and history that is intentionally being erased, there is in a way, especially in like our academic system, some kind of disavowal. Like we're just going to we don't even encourage people to do history.
They don't teach it anymore.
Yeah, they don't teach history. As I said before, like when I was in secondary school, it was only 6 people in my history class. Everyone else was doing government and politics. And so when you now have like like a generation of people, or I mean, I think like Nigerians have always been intelligent and like smart-ish. And so like you have people that are asking a very important questions, and your response to that seems to be like, oh my goodness, I don't understand why like you're upset about the Biafra, or when the people that live this are not upset. I just thought that was just a very like a poor response like to the question.
So on that,
I
actually,
think Ibi wanted to go. Sorry.
Yeah, I think
I think I agree with you that I think oftentimes in Nigeria, I look at some of the people, the politicians, I'm like, are you smart or not? Because it's like, sometimes you can come out with a fairly good take to show, you're not like Obasanjo is not, we know he's smart, like that's not in question. But then other times he comes out with these lazy takes, and I'm like, so which one are you? Like, how can one man contain both of these people? So I agree with you in that it's a bit of a lazy take to say, okay, because the generational trauma isn't a thing. Like, our parents died. Like, I had to live with my mom, watch her have the pain of my brother disappearing and just never returning. That's how I grew up. So obviously that's gonna cause a problem. However, I think a lot of the resistance to the conversation is that there's actually no way to make it right. Like the damage has been done. So everyone's just like, well, the best thing is just to sweep it under the rug. I know Victor no vanquish is fine.
Yeah. So okay, this could be hot. No, it's not probably not gonna be a hot take. I need to be very I need to be careful with this, right? I maintain that President Obasanjo is an extremely clever man. Like you said, Ibrahim. So I'm using that view when thinking of the answers that he gave. Um, uh, I think so. I don't know if you watch the interview again, you notice that of course he definitely skirted quite a few questions, right? But you also see that he chose to answer some questions, right? And it makes me think the questions that he did choose to answer, or the questions that he chose to give a response to. Why did he choose to give a response to that, and why did he choose the wording that he used? In preparing for the interviews, we were actually talking about how we bring up a topic like the Civil War, right? And how we frame it. Um, I simultaneously agree with you guys, but I also understand where he's coming from, which is why it's not a hot take, but I need to be careful. In some ways, he is like what you said, right? The Civil War is over, and in many ways, like we're not going to go back, and we are not going to unfight the Civil War, and it has been done. And but it still seems like there's a lot of tensions. Not seems there are still a lot of tensions that have come as a result of this Civil War, right? And it might be hard for him to understand, but it's like even though you did not fight in the war, you have lived through the legacies of the war, and you have lived through the impact that it has had on the lives of your family and just your general environment and your people. And I I think that people don't necessarily appreciate the environment, how impactful the environment is when they are when they are talking, or when they are trying to explain how why things are the way they are, or how they have gotten to where they are, right? And when you have grown up in an environment where your parents fought in the war, or your maybe even your grandparents, I don't know how old you might be, but your parents fought in the war or lived through a war, and the environment that you've grown up in is one that has been almost hostile, or you felt mistreated, right? It's very possible that you're nurtured into a state of not vindictive, but
Um,
resent. Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't think that's the case, Obina. I don't think that the people that grew up are nurtured into a state of vindictiveness. And I don't think that's what's going on in Nigeria right now. The truth is that, like you said, there are legacies from the war, political legacies, economic legacies. And he was in a position, he knew about them. And
Sorry, please let me actually clarify that. But let me explain what I mean by nurtured vindictive, so I don't like mistake that. What I mean is that your environment that you were raised in and the legacies of the war, or legacies of the impact, has an effect on you, has an effect on the way you think, and it has an effect on, frankly speaking, the things that you can do, the opportunities that are available to you. And it really does have a very big impact on your life, right? It's not necessarily a mindset of vindictiveness. It's actually an environment that might cause you to be resentful, right? Yes. And so what, sorry, you're going to say?
yeah. And why I'm pushing back is because it's almost like you're blaming the people that are victims of this system now, and it's almost like saying, oh, um they are the ones that have to sort of deal, and that's what Obasanjo was kind of saying, like they sort of have to get over and like deal with it. And when you listen to stories from people that actually lived during the war, you realize that they were the ones that lived through it. Right before this interview, I was reading an article by a group of economists, American Economic Association, which is like top academic journal, and they were doing research on the Biafran War, and they linked children that grew up during the war to stature and also future earnings. And I don't usually like go for those kinds of studies that automatically link some like arbitrary thing to like future earnings and like, you know, things like that. But it did show that because like they had grown up in the war, there was a downward there was a downward spiral, right? And they did it based on nutrition. But if you look at the politics of things, and if you look at the way that Nigeria was restructured after the war, there were things that could have there were things that could have changed. And so when we talk about restructuring in 2021, people have the mindset from 1970. And I don't think that necessarily we have to be thinking the same way we thought right after the war, because like so many years have passed. But the truth is that there could have been restructuring that, yeah, they could have restructured some things politically, but they didn't. And so that's why a lot of people now, you know, the people that are born after the generation that actually lived during the war are our parents. They are not like our age. We are like grandchildren and great grandchildren of the people that actually lived during the war. So we're not the ones that are saying, like, we're not the ones he's talking about when we say like they are bitter. He's talking about our parents' generation who are actually the ones that are bitter. And why they are is because you know, there's like things and people know and people see. And so when these things are actualized in people's lives, like when you think about like political participation, and the way, because of the federal budget, the way that money is doled out, the way that some states have like, you know, the way that they get money from the federal government, everything is sort of intertwined, and quota systems and things like that, they're actually important. And President Obasanjo like just like kind of diverted and didn't talk about it because he could have.
So
So I think that was the problem. And you know,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to like go on for so long. I won't talk again after this, but like we asked a question that sort of related to that and he like dodged it. And right at the end, there was a man who asked, like Dr. Falala called him on, and he asked directly. And so President Obasanjo went back to the question that he had avoided. And he said some good things. Like he talked about how future presidents have to care about justice and equity, and they have to make sure that they graft everyone in, but he didn't go into specifics. And I think that if he had gone into specifics, it would have indicted him in some sort of way, or maybe it wouldn't have painted him in a good light, because people would have thought, oh, but you could have done that and you didn't do it, or something like that. I don't know, but like, I just think that there was a lot of diversion and a lot of political, he was very political about it.
Can I ask a question in light of what you just said, Isabella? I'm just thinking of like the questions that were asked in terms of looking back, what would he have done differently? Right. And like, what did you guys think? Just in light of what Isabella's kind of said of him not necessarily going into details. And maybe because like if he did, then it would have been like, but you were the leader, you were in power then. And so I guess, I mean, maybe I'm asking a question that the answer is already clear, but maybe that tied into his response about being like he has no regrets, which I found also like,
I can't believe he said he had no regrets.
it's like
No,
I
actually, I can.
funny. I mean, I guess I understand. Like, maybe there's some things that didn't turn out the way you liked, but just like, I regret nothing. And he was like, peace.
exactly.
So okay, so I might take us back, but like I can kind of understand why he would have no regrets, right? And I think it goes back to just really how hard leadership really is. At some point in time earlier, we were talking about, hopefully, nobody would intentionally vote for things that are against their interests, right? And I believe if knowing where his motivation lies or knowing what he genuinely cares about, he would it would be very unreasonable for him to take actions that he believes would be against the interest of what he cares about. And if that is Nigeria, then it's very hard to believe that he would purposely take actions that he knows would be against the interest of Nigeria, no matter how controversial they might be. I do want to go back to to Biafra, Biafra and the Nigerian Civil War, right? Okay, so of course, a very controversial statement that he made, right? But in preparing for these interviews, it was we had a question of how do we address this, and in some ways, I subscribe to a very stoic view of things, and oh, this might come back to haunt me one day, but I believe that there's, in some ways, you need to not necessarily move on, definitely acknowledge that it happened and definitely take the lessons from it and definitely be aware of it, right? But it's more important for you to, in seeking justice, it's more important for you to develop yourself and develop your communities and not rely on other people to do it, right? Build and strengthen your own communities, which, in my opinion, is what I see in the East quite a bit. Not quite a bit, like all over the place. The East is taking the time to develop themselves and develop their economy and rebuild and in fact, in some ways, they are strengthening themselves. And that is, I usually say that this is in spite of the legacies of the war, right? And I think that's what's more important for us to focus on. Justice and recognition of the past, the legacies of the war are very important. But it's way more important for me, in my opinion, for us to focus on building a like stronger and greater region that we want to see, right? Because at the end of the day, the apologies are just going to be apologies, or whatever apologies there may be. It's more important for us to get to a point where we are strong and where we are able to,
But
fend for
that's the
ourselves.
thing. I mean, of course, there are some people that are like, oh yeah, I want an apology, but I don't think Southeastern people are looking for an apology. It's like saying black people want an apology from white people for slavery. That's not what they
Exactly.
want.
That's not.
There's institutional things that affect their lives every day. And a country that will continually be haunted, that does not reckon with its history, will continue to be haunted by it. And so America is the way it is. People are storming Capitol Hill because of things that were happening during Jim Crow and they don't realize. And so the rage will continue to build. And that's why there was a question we asked about how injustice and peace, like when people say no justice, no peace, it's not a threat, it's the truth. When there is no justice, people cannot just move on. People are building things, like you said, but like you said, it's in spite of a system, in spite of something that has happened that is traumatic. And when you don't reckon with it, now nobody is saying that. It's not like nobody's asking for reparations, or like, you know what I mean? It's not like a crazy thing. They're not saying they give free money to everybody in the East, but they are saying that as a country, in Germany after World War II, German kids, all of them learn what Germans did to Jewish people. And that's why it's not going to happen again. But we don't learn it. We don't learn history in our schools. We don't learn about the Civil War. People skirt over it. And now history has been removed from the curriculum. It's not as if it's even there. Like, it's not there. My mom was telling me the other day. So it's like, what are we doing? And part of it is that the people that were alive, like people that were doing those things, are still alive. So I understand. But it's like, until we learn our history, we cannot function properly in the present. We will continue, it's continue to hold us and chokehold us. So that's just the truth. We have to reckon with it, and we have to we have to be uncomfortable with it, and then move on and learn how to live with each other, because that's just the truth. We have to face each other because we're in this country together. So